I've been in the place of someone who swallows their words, the one who thinks 1,000 things but says very little, the one who smiles to avoid conflict, then walks away wishing they had spoken up. And the truth is, for years, that made me look smaller than I really was. Worse, it made me believe I was smaller. What I didn't know is that the way you speak and the way you present yourself to others is what builds your identity in the eyes of the world. It was tough to realize that, while I hesitated over every sentence, other women, often less prepared than I was, were being seen as references. Not because they knew more, but because they spoke with conviction. The day I understood that, I started paying attention to myself, cutting excuses, stopping the habit of decorating sentences just to avoid bothering anyone, and saying what needed to be said with presence. No excess, no apologies. That's when everything changed. If you also feel like it's about time you spoke like the woman you want to become, hit the like button, subscribe, and stick around. Because today you're going to learn how to position yourself like a millionaire, even before your bank account shows it. Pillar 1. I learned to speak with clarity, not excess. I always thought that, to be taken seriously, I had to talk a lot. Explain every detail, justify every opinion, repeat the same idea over and over until no one could possibly doubt me. And the result? I got exhausted, and people tuned me out. That's when I realized a millionaire woman doesn't fill the space with words. She owns the space with clarity. A simple sentence, spoken with conviction, is worth more than 10 minutes of justifications. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. I started practicing this in small situations. Meetings, casual conversations, even text messages. Instead of rambling, I went straight to the point. And to my surprise, people's reactions changed. More respect. More attention. More authority. I noticed that those who talk too much sound insecure. It's as if they're trying to convince themselves. But those who speak what's necessary calmly and firmly radiate confidence. And confidence is magnetic. Now, when I open my mouth, I know I don't have to prove myself. I just need to align my words with the woman I'm building. And that makes all the difference. Comment. My clarity is my power. If you've also noticed that the more directly you speak, the stronger your presence becomes. Pillar 2. I learned to hold silence without discomfort. For a long time, I thought silence was a sign of weakness. If a pause came up in conversation, I'd rush to fill it. Say anything, change the subject, make up explanations. It was like silence was my enemy, and I had to fight it. But the millionaire woman doesn't fear silence. She understands that silence is presence. That when you breathe before answering, when you look someone in the eyes without rushing, when you don't scramble to justify yourself, you communicate something far stronger than hurried words. You communicate self-mastery. The first time I practiced this, it was uncomfortable. A tense meeting, someone pressed me for an immediate answer. My instinct was to blurt out anything, but this time I paused. I breathed, and calmly said, I need a moment to think. The impact was immediate. I didn't lose respect, I gained it, because those who don't panic in silence show they trust themselves. Now I understand. Speaking is power, but knowing when not to speak is strategy. And that strategy turns any environment into a stage where your presence is noticed. Comment. My silence also communicates power. If you've also realized that it's not always about saying more, but about the calm that comes from holding your ground. Pillar 3. I learned to use body language as an extension of my voice. Even before I spoke, my body was giving me away. Slouched shoulders, crossed arms, lowered eyes, hurried steps as if I were apologizing for taking up space. I didn't need to open my mouth to look insecure. My body was speaking for me. Watching strong women, I noticed, the voice is only half of communication. The other half is in posture, in eye contact, in the rhythm of gestures. A millionaire woman doesn't need to shout to be heard. She walks into a room and is noticed because her presence speaks for her. So I started training, shoulders back, spine straight, steady eye contact. Not arrogant, but clear. It seemed simple, but it was transformative. I realized that when my body radiated confidence, even my voice came out stronger. And the most curious part? People began listening to me more attentively, even before I said a word. I understood that posture is energy, and energy is magnetic. Today, when I walk into a space, I don't need to rush to be seen. My body communicates, I belong here. And comment. My posture speaks for me. If you've also noticed that the way you show up in the world can open doors before your first word. Pillar 4. I learned to eliminate words that weaken my authority. I didn't realize it, but every sentence I spoke was loaded with self-diminishing phrases. Sorry to bother you, but I think maybe I could be wrong, but it was like, before even sharing my idea, I was already putting myself below others. These little expressions drained my strength. They signaled insecurity, and they made even good ideas sound weak. The turning point came when I noticed that the women I admired spoke differently. They didn't apologize for existing. They didn't dress up their sentences with conditionals. They said what needed to be said, clearly. And even when they were wrong, they owned their words without apologizing for having spoken up. So I started reviewing my language. I swapped "I think" for "I believe." I cut out "sorry to bother you" and replaced it with "I need to talk to you." I dropped the maybe and said firmly, "This is my proposal." At first it sounded strange even to me, but over time my mind aligned with my words. And I realized each word was a seed of identity. Today, I know the way I speak positions me even before the results show up. And that awareness is part of my power. Comment, my words reinforce my authority. If you've also decided to stop weakening your sentences and your presence. Pillar 5. I learned to use questions to lead conversations. I used to believe that leading a conversation meant talking more, showing knowledge, filling the space with arguments. But the more I talked, the more I noticed I was just trying to prove something. And deep down, I was giving away too much energy and too much power. That's when I realized influential women didn't try to win by speaking in excess. They led by direction. They asked questions. And with just a few words, they got others to reflect. I started testing it. Instead of answering right away, I would ask, "Why do you think that way? What's the priority for you right now? What if we looked at it from another angle?" The magic happened. I wasn't just talking less. I was having more impact. Because asking is leading. The one who asks guides. The one who asks shows presence without forcing it. And, interestingly, I noticed people started listening to me more. Because I wasn't just dumping answers. I was creating space for dialogue. And that placed me in a position of natural respect. Today, I know the millionaire woman doesn't need to prove she knows everything. She creates movement with questions that open doors. And that's worth far more than long speeches. Comment, my questions show leadership. If you've also realized that when you guide consciously, your voice gains more strength. Pillar 6. I learned to stand by my opinion even when it wasn't the most popular. I used to change my mind just to avoid conflict. If the majority disagreed, I backed off. If someone raised their voice, I gave in. Deep down, I knew what I thought. But it was like my opinion only had value if it was validated by others. And you know what that caused? Frustration. Because I'd leave conversations with a knot in my throat, feeling like I had betrayed myself yet again. It was like every silence of mine was a message to the world. My voice doesn't really matter. The shift came when I realized respected women don't please everyone. They're not afraid to stand by their vision, even when eyes are skeptical. Not because they're stubborn, but because they know what they believe. I started training in small situations, saying I see it differently without over-explaining, laying out my point clearly, then stopping there, without needing to convince anyone. And I discovered that standing by an opinion doesn't mean fighting. It means positioning yourself. Over time, my voice grew steadier, and I gained something priceless: respect. Because someone who changes position under every bit of pressure is never seen as a reference. But someone who stands firm transmits stability, and stability is magnetic. Comment. My voice carries weight. If you've also decided you won't water down your opinion just to fit in. Pillar 7. I learned to talk about money without fear or shame. I grew up hearing that talking about money was rude, that asking about prices was impolite, that charging for something was harsh. And without realizing it, I carried those ideas into adulthood. Even when I worked hard, I shrank when it came time to negotiate. Even when I needed it, I accepted less than I was worth. And when someone spoke about wealth, I felt uncomfortable, as if it wasn't a subject meant for me. But then I noticed, millionaire women talk about money naturally. Not arrogantly, but clearly. They negotiate without fear, set prices without apologizing, and discuss investments like they're talking about their weekly schedule. So I decided to face what I'd been avoiding. I started asking more questions, educating myself, talking about money without lowering my eyes. At first, my voice trembled, but little by little, the shame gave way to confidence. And I understood. Money only respects those who face it head-on. Today, talking about money is part of my identity, because I know that when I stayed silent, I was reinforcing the old belief that wealth wasn't for me. Now, every time I speak about it with awareness, I reinforce a new message. I deserve it. I know it. I build it. Comment. I talk about money with confidence, if you've also realized that silence never made anyone rich. Pillar 8. I learned to turn my voice into authority. I used to talk a lot, but no one seemed to truly listen. It was as if my words just slipped by unnoticed. I shared good ideas, but they were ignored until someone else repeated them later. And that made me feel invisible. That's when I realized it wasn't just what I said, it was how I said it. My voice came out insecure, rushed, like someone asking for permission to exist. And no one respects a message that carries doubt. So I decided to change. I started practicing my tone, my rhythm, my pauses. It seemed like a small detail, but it was powerful. When I spoke slowly, with conviction, my presence shifted. People paid attention. The room went quiet. I understood that the voice is an instrument. If used consciously, it doesn't just transmit information, it transmits identity. And the millionaire woman knows that. She doesn't speak just to be understood. She speaks to be remembered. Today, when I use my voice, it's not to compete for space. It's to affirm who I am. And that turns every conversation into an opportunity for positioning. Comment. My voice carries my authority. If you've also noticed that the way you speak can open doors even before results show up. Pillar 9. I learned to communicate my vision of the future before realizing it. For a long time, I only spoke about what I had already achieved. I hid behind what was concrete, afraid of sounding pretentious if I shared my plans. I thought that if I said my dreams out loud, someone would laugh, doubt me, or remind me of my limitations. And to avoid that pain, I stayed silent. But then I discovered that millionaire women do the opposite. They speak about their goals as if they're already on the calendar, not because they've happened, but because they're already decided within them. They know words are seeds, and that declaring their vision is the first step toward making it real. So I started practicing. Instead of saying one day I want to, I began saying I'm building. I swapped maybe I can achieve for this is part of my path. And I noticed that the more I heard myself speaking firmly, the more I believed in myself. Yes, some people pulled away, but others drew closer. And it was those new connections that opened doors, created opportunities, and confirmed I was on the right path. Today, I don't wait until after I achieve to share. I communicate first, because I know that when I speak my vision, I'm committing to it. Comment. My vision is already reality. If you've also realized that the way you talk about your dreams already begins shaping your identity. Pillar 10. I learned that positioning myself matters more than being accepted. For a long time, my priority was to be accepted. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be seen as the nice person, even if it cost me my own voice. And it worked to an extent. I was well regarded but never remembered as a reference. It was painful to realize. Chasing acceptance was making me invisible, because no one respects someone who's constantly reshaping themselves just to please. The turning point came when I understood that positioning is what builds identity. The millionaire woman isn't remembered because she agrees with everyone. She's remembered because she knows what she believes, speaks with firmness, and holds her ground even when it's not pleasing. I started training this in small steps. Stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Stopped accepting invitations that diminished me. Stopped softening my opinions just to avoid discomfort. The result? Some people walked away, and that was great, because it made space for those who truly respect my presence. And the respect I had always sought from others started to grow inside me. Today, I understand. Being accepted is comfortable. But being respected is transformative. Comment. I choose respect over acceptance. If you've also decided to stand by your identity instead of shrinking it to fit in. If there's one thing I've learned in this journey, it's that transformation doesn't begin in the bank account. It begins in the way you speak, in the way you position yourself, in the way you present yourself to the world every single day. Because it doesn't matter if you wear expensive clothes if your posture still asks for permission. It doesn't matter if you have great ideas if your words come out loaded with insecurity. It doesn't matter if you dream big if you can't sustain your vision in a firm voice. What makes a woman unrecognizable isn't just the money she earns, but the identity she builds along the way. And that identity is visible. It's in the tone of your voice, in the clarity of your words, in the silence you hold, in the boundaries you set. When you speak and position yourself like a millionaire woman, even before you are, the world begins to respond accordingly. Doors open, the right connections appear, and most importantly, you start believing in your own greatness, because you practice it every day. Comment. My voice already shows the millionaire woman I am, if this video resonated with you. And if you haven't hit like or subscribed yet, now's the time. Because your transformation doesn't start tomorrow. It starts the moment you decide to express yourself as the woman you were born to be.